Hey everyone, so this week, I guess I'm continuing the trend of playing old standard decks in Modern and seeing how they go. So, wasn't sure what I was going to play, and then a buddy of mine posted this list on Facebook, and it looked pretty sweet. I changed some stuff. Shout outs to Mike Siegel for the sweet hookup. I think I saw Jacob Wilson playing a deck similar to this a while ago. I think the Thought-Knot Seer Eldrazi Temple stuff is Siegel's innovation, but yeah, basically black green Delirium. So we have some Emrakuls. That's our top end. And Modern actually adds some sweet stuff to this, most notably Satyr Wayfinder. This is a great card that I haven't had the pleasure of casting in quite a while, so I'm pretty excited. But yeah, pretty normal stuff. Just filling the graveyard and working with that to some degree. So we have 4 Traverse the Ovenwald, 22 land. Siegel was saying that he was kind of flooded with like 3 Traverse and 22, but I felt like it was pretty easy to turn on Delirium in this deck, so playing 4 Traverse just seemed kind of normal to me, and I'd rather be flooded than screwed with this deck, certainly. And the main thing I was concerned about was having early colored sources for all of my cards, so, you know, if maybe you have like 2 or 3 lands, but you don't have any green mana, right? Like, that doesn't really help you. You have enough lands technically, but not actually enough mana, so, yeah. And the fact that like Traverse late game can get a threat means that I think I would much rather have like more lands than few lands, you know? So yeah, basically like kind of a mashup of the standard decks and Modern Jund. So we have some Thoughtseizes, some Inquisitions. I would be down with another discard spell, probably an Inquisition. Could also see a third Thoughtseize, but that's a little bit too much life loss. I don't know. Had to skimp on a few things to fit all the cool stuff in here, so we let loose on one of the discard spells. 3 Fatal Pushes, 5 fetch lands to turn it on, 2 Nile Spell Bombs, so like not a ton of stuff really. I mean, obviously you can lose some of your stuff in combat or whatever, but I do kind of want a 6th fetch actually, but just you need all the colorless sources, the Llanowar Waste, which, you know, might be kind of awful. I don't know. We'll see. And like the Twilight Mires, which again are like also kind of awkward with Eldrazi Temples. So mana's not perfect, but we do need colorless mana for the Thought-Knot Seers, and I do think that those are pretty good. Clock plus Disruption, and I guess like these kind of make up for having 1 fewer discard spell. Although obviously these are great on turn 1, and Thought-Knot is not necessarily going to go after the same stuff that the turn 1 discard spells are going after. So it's not really like an exact swap or anything because they do kind of different things, but oh well. So we have pushes, a couple abrupt decays, a couple eye blights ending, tribal, what's up, and a dismember for removal. Satyr Wayfinder, Grizzly Salvage, grapple with the past to fill the graveyard. I do think the Grizzly Salvage on average is probably going to be better than grapple with the past, but again, grapple is easier on the mana, so we're kind of going that route, making some concessions. 2 Liliana the Last Hope, just a reasonable card in Modern, I think. There are enough 1 toughness things running around, and even if they have a 2/2, like a Goblin Guide or something, at least this holds it off for the turn, and this is a pretty reasonable threat as far as either the ultimate or the -2, just recurring your big stuff. Can also fuel Delirium, so that's good. Another way to fill your graveyard if you actually need that. A couple Nile Spell Bombs. So we have a couple Planeswalkers, a couple Tribal, a couple Artifacts in the main deck. Certainly could go a little bit harder as far as like trying to actually fuel Delirium and get Emrakul to be as like cheap as it possibly could be. So like could have more enchantments, more artifacts, like Architects of Will is definitely a card that you could play, but I'm basically just playing the stuff that I think is good enough on its own, and I'm not stretching the deck too much just to try and make Emrakul happen. So Spellbomb is a card that I think is just completely fine to main deck in Modern, assuming that you have deck space, and it's not super bad against anyone, and a lot of decks actually just have a lot of graveyard synergies between like Snapcaster, Tarmogoyf, whatever. So then the matchups like Dredge, where this just completely hoses them, so that's great too. And then we have the Traverse package. So we have a Brain Maggot, which is basically just like a cheaper Thought-Knot Seer. This probably doesn't have to be here, but combo decks are kind of one of the bigger concerns. So again, this is like another one of those cards that kind of makes up for not having all the 1 mana discard cards. And man, that picture is just gross. That is hideous. 1 Scavenging Ooze, so this is our graveyard hate that we're able to find with Traverse. Also just kind of a pseudo Tarmogoyf. Tireless Tracker for a draw engine. With Tracker, I would certainly like to have more fetch lands also, because like playing Tracker fair like in Standard is just not nearly as good in Modern, especially when you could be making 2 clues a turn. So I would like to get another fetch in there if possible, but it doesn't really seem like it. So Tracker might be kind of medium. Ishkana is probably not main deckable, but it does seem kind of sweet. I can't like think of any specific deck where I'm like, oh man, like Ishkana would just crush this deck. Like maybe Affinity, I guess, but even then that's kind of a stretch since Ishkana costs 5 and there's a lot of work in setting it up and everything. But this could be like a Grave Titan type card, but I think Emrakul for the most part is going to cost 6 or 7. So if you're going to find a 6-drop, it might as well just be Emrakul most of the time. But Grave Titan is certainly very powerful. Shriek Maw is the removal spell of choice that you can traverse for. It is possible that this is supposed to be a big game hunter because most of the things that you're going to want to kill are big. Either Tarmogoyf or Death Shadow or Gurmag Angler, things like that. So with Grixis Shadow, especially kind of like crushing the Modern events last weekend, it's possible that this should just be a big game hunter, but there aren't really any ways to madness it, so I don't know. Certainly like the non-black, non-artifact clause on Shriekmaw matters a lot. Like if it just killed anything, it would be the card that we played, right? But since it doesn't, and it does have a restriction, I'm kind of like looking at other options because I've played with Shriekmaw in the past and I know exactly like how narrow it can be at times. And then we have some Emrakuls, and well, 1 Emrakul, but Emrakul I would expect to mostly just end the game. There were matchups in Standard like Band Company and the Humans decks where you could play an Emrakul and they would have like 4 things on the board and you just wouldn't be able to deal, you know, like you'd kind of decimate their board as best you could, but then on their extra turn they would alpha you and you'd either die or just like lose on your next turn. So I don't foresee a lot of that happening in Modern. Like maybe Affinity is the one deck, but then you could always just like peel a Ravager of theirs and just wipe their entire board. So I do think that Emrakul is worth building around and actually like getting to the point where we were casting it. So this deck is not going as hard as it could be, and maybe that's a mistake. I'm not sure, but I'm sure we'll find out. Land base is kind of normal. We're green-black stuff. We have some colorless sources. We have 2 of each basic, an Urborg instead of a 3rd swamp or a fetch land. It's possible this Urborg is just better served as a fetch land. But we do only have 6 fetchable lands. I don't know. It's basically just like I wanted a bunch of dual lands early to ensure that I could either play Discard Spell or Traverse. And while Urborg does not actually do that, it is a dual land late. Especially if you end up with like, you know, Forest, Eldrazi, Temple, Land War Waste as your lands or whatever. Like Urborg just like turns on all of your black cards for free, which is pretty nice. So I do think the 1 Urborg is probably worth playing. The only other thing that I would consider playing is like maybe a Cavern of Souls. Siegel was saying that he was running into a lot of blue-white control decks, which I could see potentially being tough, and Cavern of Souls probably just KOs them. Like Traverse is not really a card that they can go after. Like they could Cryptic Command it or whatever, but then you have all your mana to do whatever you want. So they're probably just going to let that resolve and try and counter your big threat unless you're about to Emrakul them or something. But it's like, oh, what are they going to get? A Thought-Knot Seer or something? Yeah, I'll just counter that, and then you just get like a Cavern and resolve your thing anyway. So that might be nice because they can't actually counter the Traverse a lot of the time. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's something else that is a good Traverse target that can't be Cryptic Commanded or would actually just be good against Cryptic Command somehow. So I don't know. Could play like Treetop Village, Bajuka Bog, all that nonsense, but I want to keep it pretty simple. And then as for the sideboard, kind of trying to shore up some holes here. So we got a couple Grafdigger Cages. It's effectively more graveyard hate against something like Dredge, but it's mostly there for the Collected Company decks, which I do feel like kind of similar to Standard. Like they could just outcard you, you know, and either execute their combo or just draw a bunch of cards. So Cage is kind of a necessity to stop those decks. Have a Maelstrom Pulse, which is pretty common in these black-green decks, just as a way to like kill a Planeswalker or kill Lingering Souls, or just have an extra removal spell that also kills big things. It's just a really versatile card to have in your sideboard. Second Tireless Tracker, kind of want a third one. I do feel like there are matchups where just having this sort of effect is gonna be the make or break situation, you know, and having to traverse for this thing is not necessarily the best because it's generally like you've expended a bunch of resources and you probably don't have like a lot of lands left to play, especially with only 22 in the deck and not a lot of fetch lands. So I do want to naturally draw this thing, so I'm boarding in a second copy. I have one Obstinate Baloth, one Thragtusk. Just some life gain options against Burn. Thragtusk grinds pretty well. Is good against Bant Eldrazi. Two Brutalities. Pseudo Duresses. It's possible that with Brutality I don't need this Thoughtseize here. But obviously Brutality is like a much worse Thoughtseize in the matchups where you want it. It's mostly there for Burn, but also a hedge against other things like Ad Nauseam. And Seagull had a bunch of Disenchants in his board, like 2 Golgari Charms, 1 Seal of Primordium. And I think that those are pretty good for fighting Leyline of Sanctity, and I don't have any of that stuff, so hopefully we don't play against any of those decks, I guess. That's kind of my hope. And instead, my plan is I have a Lost Legacy, which also doesn't, you know, do anything against Leyline of Sanctity, but whatever. And I thought about playing a second copy, and then I was like, no, I'm going to borrow some technology from Standard and just play Dark Petition instead of the second Lost Legacy, because Dark Petition can double as a threat card against control. If you really want it against like some mid-range creature deck, you can Dark Petition for Damnation, which is pretty nice, and it just like gives your sideboard a little bit more flexibility where like you would also bring this in against like any combo deck or any graveyard deck. Like you can even petition for Cage, and that's not that bad against the company decks. Knight of Souls Betrayal is just a pretty good card overall. Obviously, it doesn't work with some of our cards. It does kill our Satyr Wayfinders, but whoop-de-doo, it doesn't really matter all that much. Kills our Brain Maggot. Hopefully, those aren't in the deck at the same time. Makes our Spiders worse, certainly, I guess. And we probably do want Ishkana and Knight of Souls Betrayal against decks with Lingering Souls, so maybe that's an issue. But I guess if you have Souls and Ishkana, it's probably whatever. Like, you have a 2/4, who cares? So just like gives you more insulation against those sorts of decks, and can actually stop the Vizier of Remedies combo. So this plus Dark Petition is probably like a reasonable add in the board. And then I just have some cards to fill out the main deck a little bit. Fatal Push against like really fast creature decks, and another Thoughtseize against like really fast combo decks, or also Cryptic Command decks. So that's it. Racing to Emrakul. Let's do it.